60 degrees. Alright, we'll get back. Thank you.
All right. I hope to give you a little bit more example of fun stuff. There's much more, many more pictures coming up about style, etc. Let's talk about something about information. I'm changing topics now because I want to get you first like a feel for what we do in consulting, and more importantly about how we treat data. But I want to make some general consideration about information and some techniques that I have, but also take into account when you're presenting information. First of all, we're going to talk about concepts such as information density and information integrity, and generally speaking, how you present things so that they are a real reflection or plausible reflection of reality. In terms of integrity, one of the things that I want to make sure that you, it's a bag full of remarks and recommendations. You might see me really documenting my sources, which is something that's very irritating when you see any kind of presentation. In fact, I'm presenting, you don't know where they come from. Now, you don't have to triple check, but you need to be at least give a hint as to where you find this information. You find it yourself, that's fine too, but say it. Let's talk about data density. One of the things that is really nerving when you see presentation or reports or something of this nature is the concept of information density. If you compare this, you have a very busy chart here that frankly only shows 15 points, 15 data points. Now contrast this with this chart from the New York Times. It's actually extracted from one of the 3 absolutely fantastic books that you must acquire if you are interested in the visual presentation of information. And they're all by Edward Tufte, and every is absolutely a pleasure to read and chock full of information, and which I replicated here in some instance with due reference and mention of source. But this is an example in this book, but you could take it anywhere again, best practice in the New York Times. You have about 300 data points, actually more than that. You probably have something like 1,200 data points, because for each day you have the low, the average, the high. You have information about the relative humidity every day. You have information about the actual. At the same time, this is something that gives you a sense of the overall picture, and you get a sense of being reliable data because it has the level of granularity and precision that shows that actually this is backed up by real data. You have a relatively, as I said, discrete framework. I mean, the grid, for example, doesn't come off like overwhelmingly. This is a masterpiece of data presentation that has a lot of information density, not for the sake of providing all this data, because frankly you cannot retrieve a particular information point necessarily, but it oozes data integrity because it's clear that this reflects facts. This one is okay too, but frankly there's a lot of ink being used for only 15 data points. And you'll see even worse example later. So what I'll repeat this information later. It's information is density to bring a level of credibility. You'll see example of one that. Here, I guess there's been a while that I've been asked to make this presentation. So since January, at least January, I've been collecting information. So what am I going to present? And so I was in Europe, I think, and I found this chart here. Now this is typical of something. This is actually Financial Times is usually a very good paper. This is very good. This is more, you will see something you have in USA Today. You'll see some examples. So you have a chart here, and you have a graph, right? So that's the graph, and then you have a key here. Okay, I get it. The key is the key here, right? I got it. All right. So has it anything to do with the top of your head? No, none whatsoever. It's a key. And some clever guy has, or lady, has said, okay, it's key. I'm going to put a key because this looks like a key. All right, okay. So this is the data you're talking about, right? So it looks like this thing is going down. Boy, it's really going down. It goes down to this thing. So this is the visual impression that you get, right? That thing is trending towards zero. Whatever it is, it's not good. It's like declining rapidly. Oh my God. Well, actually, when you take the information, first thing, the scale is wrong. Go back. This thing starts at 1,000 to 800. So if you really want to look at the data, this is the way it should look. Okay, it's bad, it's going trending down. It's not that bad. It's not. I mean, the big key suggests that you were going to zero. Okay, it's going down. But look, there's another thing you can do with this information is stretch it. And it's no more true or wrong than the other one. But look, it seems like you have indeed a gradual. This seems to get better recently, right? And there's two ways of looking at this. One is things were great, green, they got worse, red. They're going back up. Life is good again. So I could, just as well say, well, the situation is rebounding because, and we're trending with the blue sky, and you look at the arrangement of color, etc. So it's not as bad. So my point here is that depending on what kind of way you want to look at this data, just visually, you have the same data that gets you a message that things are getting better and things are going terrible. I don't know which one it is. In fact, if you read the paper itself, it says somewhere here that things are getting, the rule change has been a factor behind the recent rebound in China's stock market, which has risen 30% in the past 2 months. Well, why don't they feature this? Because that's the message of that chart. So I didn't redo it, but I would have probably number one put a different scale, get rid of the key, which is completely extraneous information that is a distraction, and say, well, this is here something happened. It would have indicated that something happened here that reversed the trend. So the point here is that, and this is a very well-known issue, scales, using the right scales, and making sure that you visually insist on the point you want to make without using, and you heard me use that word a couple of times now before the end of the lecture, is avoid chart junk. Chart junk is all this extraneous information that frankly has nothing to do with the explanation of information. It's distracting, and it's distracting at best, and at worst misleading, as it was the case. It's a natural situation. We made that up. There's plenty of this. And now when you read paper, please look at this. It has so many examples, it's overwhelming. So in terms of data and how you present them, think about credibility is gained by using the right framework and questioning scales and synchronization. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more heavy tools. My objective this time is to give you a list of concepts, perhaps buzzword that you might need in getting to business consulting or anywhere you are. I want you to know what the concept data mining means. I want you to have a better appreciation with how you use statistics in the analyzing information. That's a tall order. We have another hour, so I'm not going to review statistics, but enough hopefully to give you a sense for what can be used in this context. So I'm going to review a couple of tools that I've been using and analyze a couple of cases that will make those concepts more familiar. One thing that I really love is what I call mind map. I don't know if you talk about mind maps in your course. Same thing. When I started to prepare for this presentation 3 months ago, there was a lot of ideas that I had in mind because I do that for a living with charts. I mean, that's my core competence now. They're powerful, right? So there's a lot of things that came to mind, and so how do you organize this? Well, there's a simple technique. If you go on the web, Google the mind map, and you'll find all sorts of things, and they use a particular software to do this. Right? But that's a good way of organizing your thoughts. You put there what is it you want to talk about, and you organize it again through the form of data linear trees, okay. I wanted to talk about how you go from fact to knowledge. Of course, you have a section on tool and reference. I wanted to talk about how you envision, how you make information visually relevant. And that has to do with general principle that I knew that I want to talk about. And also, I knew that I wanted to talk about statistics and how you use it. And then for each of those, I say, okay, I know that I want to take on one point about 1, 10, 8, 9, 10. I want to talk about information integrity, mentioning new sources, addressing the issue of high precision, low accuracy. I'll get back to this. How you trace information. This is what gave me the idea. I need to talk to them about QFD because I need to be able to demonstrate what kind of tool you use to go from making a decision and trace it back to how you got there. Tools that say, well, I need to talk about mind map, statistic, data mining. Believe it or not, it took me several days to even organize my mind map, and because it was an iterative process, and frankly, the final product is not exactly organized this way, but it helped me at least map where I wanted to go. So, again, in the near future, you'll have to put together some presentation or don't concern yourself too much about structure first, because structure will evolve from the flow of ideas. It's important to be exhaustive, and if you really have no idea what you're going to talk about, go into a linear approach. But in many cases, you know what the key items that you want to discuss. Organize them in a mind map. You will see it really helps you do a simple list. I didn't put it there, but I took this list and literally I did a table that says, okay, I took all those concepts and I put them in a table 3 by 3 that said this is very important and this is easy to get. And I organized my priorities in terms of developing slides by developing first what was very important and difficult to do because I want to have that out of the way. I could have presented that chart, but I didn't want to be too self-referential. Yes?
Can you also talk about the cases when you start with the recommendation versus you give the recommendation at the end?
Help me. An example.
For you come up with the solution hypothesis. You are communicating that to the client. I would assume in some cases you first communicate the solution and then go back and support that thing, versus you first build up the data and then give the...
You want an example where I did that, where we did this, or in the context of this presentation?
What are the cases? In which case you prefer what?
Well, about 6 years ago, I can give you the case that I can talk. I mean, we were retained by Merrill Lynch to talk about the organization of their information technology group. And I was retained by the CTO, and it was a very big transformational exercise. It was about 4,000 people, these 3 continents, etc. So I met with the CTO at the time, and we had sold him on a very rigorous process. That's how we got the contract. It was about $2-3 million, $2.5 million. So the proposal was very, very structured. And said, this is how we do. We're going to collect information. At the end, we will have organization charts and job description. That's how I sold it. I sold it because and it worked because Sri at the time told me, well, you're the only one who seemed to have a framework. Or at least you had really get some thoughts about it. Now, the first meeting we said, I said, okay, let's leave this aside. Let me tell you what I really want to do. And I want you to use your methodology to get there. Fine? With the client. And it turns out that we came up with a conclusion that was relatively quickly, I think it was in the first week. The central, I will give you the specific, the central construct that we wanted to introduce in this problem space was the following. An IT organization, and you heard that, I don't know, it must be 10 years, because I've been telling this story for 10 years. An IT organization is a service organization. As such, it should have the attribute of a service organization. What does it mean? Well, you all took marketing. It means that the internal user of the IT group should be considered clients. They should have access to what you do as an IT group, as being a service provider, and therefore you should have a catalog. And the IT organization should have a product management function. In other words, a systematic set of processes that constantly evaluate what the market demand is, what are the features of your product set, and what is your competition. In other words, having a mindset that even though you are an internal organization with a priori a captive audience of people who must buy from you, you still have the discipline of organizing yourself and how you interact with those in a way that mimics what the service organization does. And from that premise, we knew very quickly that what we need to do is to organize a product management function within the IT group, a customer support model, etc., etc. So it has all the ramifications. We intellectually agree with that almost instantly because that's something that we knew and we agreed with. It took about 3 months of a fairly heavy process to bring the rest of the organization, everybody, no, I'm not pretending we brought 4,000 people to understand, agree the concept, but about 3 months to really get the stakeholder engaged into developing that, the specifics, what does that mean? What would the product manager do day to day? So that's a good example of, we had a problem, which is how do you organize a group that is so diverse, etc. What is the organizing principle? Defining this organizing principle relatively quick and painless. Finding the specifics, implementing the specifics, particularly the first implementation plateau, for example, experimenting with the concept for one particular product. That took much longer, so that's a good example. Doesn't that answer your question?
I think I was thinking of the actual presentation. Most of the when you were communicating that solution, sometimes you can start with the actual recommendation, and
yeah, that's very important. From a format standpoint, what you just said is very true. That you need to have an executive summary that very quickly says, and very briefly, in no more than 2 pages, quite frankly, what you want to say. And it's been my experience, and anybody in business, that it's about the attention span that you can expect from people at the decision-making level, that explicitly presenting your findings without any of the justification or anything, this is what you must do, is very, very critical. It not always fits into like a few pages, but exposing the outcome of your reasoning very early in the process is critical. Let's go back a little bit to the tools and what we're doing, how we present information. So this is how I essentially organize my thoughts. Again, from a practical standpoint, because I want this to be somewhat practical, is think about what you're going to present in a few weeks. Organize your thoughts using a mind map, and it will give you an inventory of everything you have to do. You will find, as I said, then you can already have a multi-threaded process. For example, I started independently of this. I knew I wanted to talk to you a little bit about data mining, but frankly, I'm not a data miner expert, so I knew I needed to deepen my understanding of data mining. So I knew I started to, review, talk to people, etc. I knew that it was a component of what I wanted to present, but I didn't wait until I got there to do this. So my problem solving had several threads. One is to do an inventory of what I wanted to talk about, do some research, already starting to make some component of the presentation. It was very easy for me, for example, to do things that I already had. For example, the first initial slide, I almost excerpted from deliverable that I already have, so it was relatively easy to get started. Again, nonlinear, multi-threaded approach, and mind map helps organize your thoughts without organizing them, but really giving you like literally a mind map of the issue. Now let's talk about statistics. I'm sure that's a requirement for you to take statistics. So I'm going to try to summarize.
I said earlier on that qualitative slides are supposed to be
Yeah.
less is.
Yeah, except for statistics where I wanted to be grateful and not in high
Just
density.
curious, just want to make sure I heard that correct.
So, I tried to put in one slide everything you should know about statistics. Can you imagine how challenging that is? I don't know what you should know, so I came up with an answer, at least with what I think I could talk to you about. So, at the end of the day, I mean, one thing you have to remember is there's three types of data that you're presenting. One of the major problems with people who use statistics in number in general is that they misuse the characteristics of those three types of data. There's nominal data when you look at, you know, if you want to describe something, you can assign a code, whether it's a color code, you can put numbers if you want, but in and of itself, it doesn't mean anything. Green is not better than red, or red is, okay, so those are nominal information. The ordinal information, that's when you actually can have a relationship in terms of order. You know, temperature is a good one, because it says, you know, 50 degrees, 70, but it doesn't mean that 70 degrees is 7/5 of the temperature of 50. It is an order, but it's not proportional. There is no sense of proportional ratio, if you will, between the data. You could. This is typically what you use when you say bad is 1, okay is 2, good is 3, great is 4. But you know, if you do a statistic, it doesn't mean that something is great is twice as good as something is rated 2. Very important. Then you have the interval ratio when there's really an element of proportionality. If you're going to map, you know, length of surfaces or things of this nature, there is a correlation between. That's when you really can do statistical analysis of the ratio itself. This is going to be theoretical, but you'll see why when you mix this kind of information, it translates into misleading analysis. And the other thing that is important is that the way you're going to visual data is really dependent on the type of data. For proportion, I'm going to give you some example: bar charts, distribution curve, which are also known as histogram, XY chart, spider chart. You probably haven't seen many of those, but I think this is a very good tool to introduce you to multivariate presentation where you have a lot of messages to have. So this has to do with visualization. A different topic that I don't know. I'm not going to expand on this, but it essentially says that when you have a collection of stuff that is big enough and it has some characteristic, whether it's average or any kind of measurable characteristic, like what's the variation across the mean. There's something fantastic that is magic, is that if you take a sample out of this group and you analyze what is the average or mean or variance of this particular sample, or if you take the sample, another type of sample, and if you plot how the means of those 2, 3, 7, 10 samples look like, you'll end up with always the same curve, which is a bell-shaped curve. It can be proven mathematically, but that's really magic. What it means is that it doesn't matter what your initial distribution is. If you have enough widgets and if you systematically sample them, what you get in terms of the distribution of the result for each of those for these aggregate samples is a good reflection of the entire set as a whole. It's a bit complicated to even articulate, but it is something very convenient. Because it means that you can do sampling of a large pool of information and make informed decision about them within a certain margin. So this, of course, what needs to be kept in mind. When you are confronted with doing a statistical analysis of anything, you have to. There's essentially two things that you need to keep in mind. One is only one factor that you want to analyze, then the concept of mean, median, variance, distribution, quartile are relevant. And that's something that, again, we don't have enough time to spend on this, but it's amazing the number of times that you have in the newspaper or otherwise, information of the mean, which is really irrelevant. What you should probably look at is what is the median. I'm not going to give you an example, but keep that in mind when somebody gives you a mean. I mean, what is much more relevant is what the average. If you have a proportion, if you have a population of people, and you are given the average salary, it won't tell you much. Think about this when you do salary negotiation. Ask for what the median is. Because if you are below the median, you know there's like at least 50% of people making more than you are. That data is not consistent with what the average information you're going to be given. Anyway, when you have multivariate analysis, that's when you really need to go and get, as we say, neuroprofessional help for other reasons. But this is where the mathematics and the line are much more complicated. But that's another domain where the room for misinterpretation is much broader. So let's see some examples. First, let's talk about charts. I think I'm just going to give you some example of what I think are pretty good example of chart. And I'm going to comment on them from the standpoint of readability and information provided. This was an example of the work that we've done for JP Morgan Chase, and this was on refreshing one of the network, as I recall. And here you have, I think, a pretty good format that shows this is where they started. This is the total, and then this is how it is decomposed. And for each of those, you have comments here, and you have the total difference. So this was an original estimate, and this is the new estimate. So you have plenty of information now. You have the information about what was the total before, and now that we re-estimated what it was, the difference. And you can look at what has changed from before to after. In other words, this was a client. They put together a budget for doing one particular project, namely the upgrading of their local area network throughout the bank. And we came in to take or not their budget. And so we really built the budget based on what we knew that was new. And this chart I think is pretty good because it shows how there's plenty of information there. It shows what was the previous distribution, the new one, and how for each item things changed. For example, they had, for this particular item, the direct hardware, they have overestimated what it was, and we revised that. And also you have across the board horizontal result here that shows that, well, oops, they have underestimated the total cost of the project by $6.5 million. And this number here reflects the total change between the two charts. Here you have a good example of the use of multivariate data because you have information about the distribution and temporal data because you have the before and after. And you have a combination of diagram that is helped by the color. There's color consistency between the two diagrams and the explanation. In other words, you have the big picture relatively quickly. This picture says that, oops, you missed your estimate by $6.5 million. And if need be, you can go into much more detail of granularity of analysis, either visually or with an explanation. This is another example I think is pretty good because, and you imagine how much wording you would have to put together to explain this without a chart. It would be practically impossible to make it visible. Here you instantly have explaining to an executive, you said, this says you've done your homework because you can look at the details. But here I can go and we did go in front of management and say, okay, we reevaluated our estimate by $6.5 million. If you really want to know why you were wrong, where we were wrong, this is the explanation. Trying to do this is it's merely by wording it would have been much more complicated. This is also a very good chart, I think, because here what it means. In that case, we were building the business case for a pretty large investment in a new network in that case. You say, okay, right, so you're going to have to pay that amount. And this is the direct savings that you're going to get. But that in and of itself is not enough to justify it. Look, because if you compare that visually, obviously this is not something that should go, but those are direct savings. And there, here it says that you're going to do indirect savings all the way here. Some of them have to do with the network itself, and some of them have nothing to do with the network itself. This is the underlying business case. If you upgrade your network, you're going to be able to get rid of things that are costly to maintain right now, but it will also enable you to do things that you cannot do now. Example, you will be able to implement, and you be able to consolidate your data centers. Without a link between your data center, you won't be able to do this. You're going to be able to implement a program to do e-learning, that is internal training of the organization. And that's something you cannot do if you don't have the bandwidth, the capacity in your network to do. So here you have a good example of how, again, you can express a lot of things that otherwise would be difficult to explain. And visually, you see that obviously the positive altogether outweigh the negative. Now this is misleading too, because if you want to make a case for disinvestment, you really should look only at this plus a proportion perhaps of this. Even better, and I'm not going to go into that many detail. For those of you who have a more in-depth knowledge of finance, the way to approach the cost justification of this particular investment is to consider the following. You're investing into this particular infrastructure so that you can buy an option to do other things that themselves has a value. So you should price this initiative using option valuation theory. I don't know if that's something they got into yet. But there's various ways to actually price out what an option is. And if you really want to do the return on investment, you factor in the direct cost, the direct savings, and something there's various ways of evaluating it, the option that it buys you to do other things. So it can be a bit more involved than it is. But frankly, our sponsor, the guy who wanted us to pay us, wanted me to make sure that we made the point across that this thing was a good thing to do. So we said, okay, this is what you're going to get. This is what you get on other projects which are technical in nature. This is what you're going to get out of other positive consequences.
And those time is not very investment.
No, that's really right. The other misleading part in a way is that this thing here is not corresponding to time. Intuitively, as you will see in another chart, that is right to left, left to right is usually time. That suggests that we're gonna. It was sort of because this is something we should be able to do relatively quickly, and this will be long-term savings. Anyway, now let me show you the one. This is the case that actually like best than the two of them. This was a situation where we were trying to analyze for a client their portfolio. Specifically, this is an organization that sells services, and we want to see plot all the clients they had in terms of revenue, margin, and we want to have a third dimension that we express by the size of the bubble of how much they spend in sales costs. Okay, so presumably this guy here means that we derive a lot of revenues with very good margin, but we spend a lot in selling. That's interesting, but that's what we came up with. So the guy who did this analysis was very proud and said, okay, this is a bit not good. What's wrong with this picture? What do you think? This is the, I mean, there's no, I mean, this is factually correct. And tell you what I find wrong. I couldn't. Yeah, there's absolutely no so what.
Yeah.
I don't know what it means, and I don't know if what changed between 2004 and 2005. Okay, and I don't know. There's two things that also appear from a fundamental standpoint. It's the following: margin includes the cost of sales, so that you have two redundant information. So if you're going to do this, putting the data on cost of sales is really not relevant, because presumably, you see what I mean, there's redundancy of the metric that makes it difficult to derive something. So but that's a minor kind of problem. The biggest problem here is that it's impossible to evaluate what's good, what's bad. You have a negative margin here. So it's a what I call high accuracy, excuse me, high, sorry, I mean, it escapes me now, of course. It's high density, low accuracy. You know, it's the situation where you have people giving you numbers with 2 decimal, while in fact they're probably known within 10%. Same thing here. There's a high precision, low accuracy. That's what I meant. There's a problem with that, and also I don't know what really that suggests in terms of. It seems like the portfolio moved from left to right, but I don't know. This guy went from there to there. So I took this data, and I say, okay, first of all, what are the questions we're trying to solve? And I thought that what we wanted to solve is how do sales results evolve from year to year? What is that causality between the sales figures and the investment? And this is actually a question. Does the investment in sales translate into additional sales? That's fundamentally what you want to know. You want to know how a client is a repeat buyer, and you say, okay, what if you are involved in invest in sales? Does it make any difference? Also look into, okay, there's 2 components sales and account management. I'm not going to go into details here, but the case could be made, just a little detail, the case could be made, you deploy salespeople 1 year, but it won't necessarily translate to sales the next year. So maybe what you should do is to look at the combined investment you make in sales 1 year and the year after next, because that's where you have the combination of sales and account management. So maybe you find some causality between the combined sales investment over several years towards the sales in the subsequent year. And then you want to know, okay, so exactly tell me what you think are the hypotheses as to how you allocate your sales resources, investment. So these are the questions. So I did this. And for 2 purposes. Number one, it gives you a good example of multivariate analysis, but the story is really here. With for each element of the story, an explanation that is based on the data. So this is what I found. I found that if there is a repeat business which shows in terms of sales. What does it mean? This is the sales, the 2005 revenues as a function of 2004 revenues. That means like if a client was spending $1 in 2004, they're likely to spend 45 cents with us or with this particular company the next year. Okay? And this number here in statistics is your level of correlations. Actually pretty good. Anything above 10% is there's some level. You can see that the curve is somewhat fitting. And that would be true even if I remove this data point here and this data point here, because those are two extremes. So I visually can tell that, yeah, it's true. This is, what is this? This is an example of a client that came out of nowhere. We did $0 this year, boom, 27 million that particular year. But there was also a client for which there was about $49 million in sales that went down to about 12. But, visually you can see that those would cancel them out. So the first conclusion of this chart would say, well, you have repeat buyers, because if you, again, you sell $1, you're likely to sell another 45 cents next year. But, and the same thing is true in terms of booking. In this particular industry, there's a time difference between the time you actually invoice and the time you recognize the sales. I'm not going into details, but there's also a correlation here, again, even with those outlier points here. But the problem is that let's look at the change in sales. And you will recognize that mathematically this number plus this number should be 1. But what it means is that, wait a minute, if I were doing $10 million in sales 1 year, actually sales will go down. So what does it mean? You'll see the conclusion. It means that you don't have that much long-term relationship with the clients. That's what this suggests, is that client bring you a year because they have a problem, and then the problem fades away, hopefully because you're helping them. But it's not that you're going to have those long-term relationships with repeat business all the time. That is a finding. It means that certain consequences in terms of how you're going to allocate your sales effort. Let me show you another line of thinking, which is on the surface. This is one I love. Salespeople, and I was in sales for 7 years. I was head of sales at one point, and this is what people tell you. Okay, they do the ratio of how much sales you make over the amount of you spend in sales, and they say for every dollar you spend in sales, you get $15 of revenue. And this diagram suggests that's the case because it shows with a pretty high level of accuracy, correlation. Again, even with you subtract the outliners, that there is, so this is $1 million spent on each account versus what they bring in. So for example, this particular client here, the company was spending $1.05 million, and this is an account that brought back about $12 million. So, you know, if the head of sales would say, look at this, I mean, there's a proportionality, it works, it's great. But if you look at sales cost versus revenue growth, you'll find out there's no correlation. You forget about it being negative. The level of correlation is so small that it's really irrelevant. What it means is that, you know, people, the client, essentially buy your services about the same way, whether or not you have spent investment in sales the year before. Well, that's interesting. And you remember I asked myself, yeah, maybe it's not immediately that year, maybe the year after that. So what I did is an analysis that said, look at the change in revenue as a function of the total of what was spent in sales for 2004 and 2005. No correlation, right? So that line of reasoning here says, you know, what you get out of a client is still very much driven by what kind of problem they have, not so much how much you're covering them and over time. So I asked myself the third line of questions, like, okay, so how do you guys make decision on putting sales dollars against those accounts? And by the way, let me go back to this. Remember the story about every dollar in sales give you 15, it's always the case, and I'll tell you why. Because if you make the ratio of what you sell with what you spend in sales, it's always going to be a multiple more than one, or you're really, really in trouble. Okay, usually you get, a company would do $10 million in sales, and I will have a sales floor that costs about $1. Okay, are you telling me that for technically it's true, every dollar you spend in sales, you get $10 in revenue, and that's a false, irrelevant ratio. So don't let people talk to you like this. So let's look at. So the booking was the same kind of analysis. The booking are loosely, no related to cost of sale. But so I asked myself, what determined how much you spend in sales in 2005 versus 2004? And the answer is. Well, it seems like the more you spend 1 year, the more you spend the other year, the next year, and with a very good degree of accuracy. So what it means, so that's one data, okay? So if you spend $1 million 1 year, you're likely to spend $650,000 the next year. And this is even a more interesting diagram because I flip things around that says, what is the correlation between how much you spend on sales in 2005 as opposed to how much revenue you did the year before? And that's again a positive correlation and with a good degree of correlation. What does it mean? It means that essentially what happens is that if you have a good account, you put a salesperson on it, then you keep him there, regardless of whether the revenue goes up or down, because it's sort of. You assume that that's the right thing to do. You have a relationship, and you continue to put those people on it. Again, the more you spend on the account. And here, you tend to do this as for established accounts. The problem with this reasoning, and now let me go from fact to data to conclusion. This is your analysis. The conclusion is, in general, sales and revenue decline over years, in fact faster for larger accounts, meaning that you have a fungible source of income. Number two, sales cost is loosely negatively correlated with sales growth. Even the repeat investment in sales and account maintenance has limited effort in subsequent sales. Number three, yet the more it's spent on an account, the more continues to be spent. And the best, the revenue in 2004 are a good predictor of 2005 cost of sales. So those are the facts. Now, this is the hypothesis, and the thing that we can then try to analyze by discussion and root cause analysis. Well, the business you're in is very transactional. Client has a problem, calls you, or you hopefully have the reputation for it to bring you in. When the problem goes away, hopefully you will solve it, but don't expect more business just because you built a relationship. What had happened is that you did your job, and they're likely to call you again next time. But don't expect to camp on this account forever. So the client happens to retain the company to deal with specific time block challenges. So the concept of, in terms of sales, you would be better off deploying hunters. People go after new opportunities, as opposed to gatherers that camp on accounts. Now, for you, I mean, I don't know what you are in the marketing classes and things of this nature, but it means that the whole concept of key accounts, the notion of, you have to nurture a relationship over time, so there's trust, you're merging your value chain, you know your customer, etc. Yes, seems like a good idea, but that's not what's going to make you more profitable. It's sort of, you have to keep an eye on what's going on, but don't overinvest. Have somebody roaming the corridors, but this notion of nurturing the relationship is a misleading one. And frankly, what you should do is you should rotate your best hunters from the minute an account is you sold a large amount. Don't keep this guy there, this lady there, because you know that your revenue will go down. It statistically will happen by 35%, and frankly, you're better off having somebody with this kind of talent for identifying opportunity on an account that is not there yet. So this has profound ramification in terms of perhaps debunking one concept, which is, key account management is critical, and also promoting a certain type of sales management. And this is what you do with statistics and correlation. Now there's some weakness into this model. First is there was only 2 data points, so that technically should not be a trend. The sales cost data, sales you usually know what it is. Sales cost, there's also a lot of costs that are not taken into account because you don't have only salespeople spend time selling and nurturing accounts. And again, it's only a 1-year period, so you really should do a multi-year analysis of revenue and cost of sale. I attempted to do this with only 2 data points for the sales cost, but that probably warrants a much larger. But it gives you already some hypotheses that you can test. So what you do as managers, you should implement perhaps this program in some either country or region and see whether it makes a difference. That's the power of statistics for you. Now let me give you my second best example. Then I'm really going to have to rush because I just realized that we are at 20 minutes. But this is, I'm sorry, this is something that actually, again, relates to my own company. That's why this is not being recorded. This is a study that was done by a reputable research firm, Forrester. There's also an advisory. No, you can. Sorry, just joking. But Mike and this is under the academic program, so I owe to the audience to be a portion. I think you get a kick out of this too. So this is the study by Forrester, and people pay good money to get this kind of study, and this is what it said. Okay, so describe to me what this diagram says. It says, okay, there's various vendors, right? And when I look at it and say, well, okay, well, Accenture seems to be good here, and maybe we're not that good. There's some members here, but very 4307. So it seems like pretty good. All right. So this is the problem I have with this chart. first off, this diagram here has nothing to do with organization satisfaction. It merely says how many people responded to the survey. I don't know why it's there. I mean, it's either relevant or not, but juxtaposing how many people responded and putting a number in front of them is two different pieces of information that's confusing. In fact, this diagram suggests that Accenture is very well known, and that's a positive thing, and Barbero is not very well known, and it's a negative thing. But then if you actually plot those numbers, which is what you would expect from, there should be some kind of visual correlation between this ranking and the chart here. This is actually the chart that you should see. And here you can see that technically Bearing Point is ranked highest in terms of customer satisfaction. That's cool. But what is the metric you use? Remember what I was saying about using dummy data? That's a dummy data for you. Because it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and they average the number. But who says that 4 is twice as good as 2? You know, let's look at this distribution here. It's true that using this scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, we end up ahead. Tell you what, in some cases, you don't use nonlinear scale. Because it's a well-known fact that when you're pissed off, you're really annoyed by your vendor, you really are. And in some cases, when you really like a vendor, it's really delighted, and you really like it. So why don't we use a scale that says -10 for the very dissatisfied, -3 for dissatisfied, 3 for satisfied, and 10 for very satisfied. That's arbitrary. It works too. It still means that -10 is not as good as -3, 3 is not as good as 10. It works. It is ordinal. But it's not an actual cast in stone number. So when I average those numbers, well, I find a very different distribution. I find that IBM is actually best. So here, what I'm trying to say, I mean, Bearing Point is still number 2, which is pretty good. So what I'm saying here is that this is a misuse of statistical information of the first degree. There's more than that. What I did, because I'm a nerd, I've actually put the numbers, and I'm going to go very quickly with this, but for those with some good mathematics background. Shall we? Okay, well, I'm still going to try it. Indulge me. So this is the distribution. For example, here you have, there was 119 people here that declared themselves satisfied with somebody. And there was 41 people who said they knew HP. Or have an opinion on HP, okay? So I plot this like this, and there was a total of 242 respondents, or opinions. Not responses, actually, but opinions formulated. So what you do here is you say, wait a minute, this number, what should it be? You say, well, there is 41 over 242 people that know HP. And there is 119 people out of 242 who are happy. So statistically, you should have 20.2 people who are both happy and no HP. Okay? The math is here. Well, you find out that 20.2, which is what it ought to be, is lower than 23. So it means that that's a good thing. It means that you have much more, like you have 2 more people out of this number, 242, that happens to be no HP and are satisfied. That's a good thing. So you plot this and you have color-coded, red is not good, green is good, and again, let me point out that Bearing Point is uniformly good or very good. And that presumably give you some information. But there's something which is called a chi-square analysis. The math is here, you actually square this number, you divide it by 242, and you look at, you tally all these numbers, and you end up with a number that is 21.42. And then you compare that with tables that says this is a threshold after which the number should be relevant or not. And this is the outcome of the computer program that I use, and it says, hey, you have 30 degree of freedom, which is the number of the vendor multiplied by the number of opinion, each of them subtraction 1, this squared at 21.2, at 95% change the, for this to be relevant, I should have found a number that's 43.37. Conclusion, this is irrelevant. We all are the same. There is no difference. Statistically, I can tell you that with a 95% chance of this is representing reality, that none of those guys are different. We're all the same. Well, it's not very surprising, because look at this distribution. I mean, and look at the number of respondents here. There's only one guy that knew bearing point and didn't like it. Do you expect to have like some realistic statistic out of those numbers? Of course not. So the point here is that this particular analysis doesn't prove anything, and the distribution is not significant. However, of course we took advantage of it, and we got into a campaign that said, of course, we need a mod consultant for client satisfaction. It's fair enough, you know, why wouldn't you? But anyway, so let me add a little footnote on this, which is, by the way, even when I did this, I tried to put here, you never can go to zero. Think about it. You're never going to be zero, you cannot choose zero, it's at least one. So this chart here should start at one. So this, you know, by making this longer, I misled you to think they were even more equal. And look at this chart here. It should not go from 0 to 3. It should go from -10 to 10. So what you thought was like a fairly significant difference between the rating is really an artifact of how it was presented. All right, I'm going to go now a little fast on some other concept that is impossible to present in any kind of real depth, but you should know. There's a science, there's a practice that's known as data mining. You should know exists out there. It's about taking a lot of data, and it's a little bit like the analysis that you have, and to select the data, understanding the data, creating a model, crunching some things about the number, transforming it, building model, assessing it, and deploying it, and see how you can derive information that you did not know was there. Again, this is the you use data mining to take large chunk of information, typically sales data or otherwise, humongous. And nowadays, the amount of data you can deal with is far beyond what's humanly possible to really do without tools. If you have just the record of a phone company and who calls when, where, how long, etc., it's humongous. You should be able to derive, to mine incredibly important statistical information and information. It is very hard. That's why there's an entire field that is known as data mining that's emerged. It uses the tool of artificial intelligence, a combination of techniques, and that's a function when you go and after your MBA, you will hear about data mining and how it's used. My message to you is it has the same kind of problem you use with statistics. You can really need to be very careful about the quality of the data you use, how the model is used, and how things are presented, to the point that data mining has been called statistics plus marketing speed. So be careful about this. But there's a lot of things that can be done with this. I just put here some concepts that you will come across if you do this, and I encourage you to link to those websites to learn more. I do have an example of running a data mining program against the data that you saw in sales. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll have the time. I'm sure we won't have the time. That not only gives you almost immediately this kind of correlation that I did actually on Excel, which is relatively painful, but also give you a way to model the information and give you the larger story. It essentially says that there's no correlation between sales and cost of sales. So data mining is important. Now I'm going to go quick and give you some. We're going to the lighter part of the presentation. This was a little bit mathematical. This is more about how things should look. I'm going to give you some example of what works in documentation and implementation, and hopefully this will be of immediate help to you as you put together your PowerPoint presentation in the next few weeks. again, very quickly, you want to have a strong but invisible framework that shows and features your data. You need to tell a story, avoid jargon, and as I said before, in text less is more, in graphic less is more. You need to also, you'll see through example what works and what doesn't work. So I have a few chart. But one concept I want you to be familiar with, and that's the concept of pattern. A pattern is, and that applies to any kind of issue. The pattern is something that has evolved into a solution. It is a solution that's been used before. The analogy you have here is a pen I use when you build boats. You don't start building a boat from scratch. You use pattern. Actually, come to think about dress, and any kind of suit or any kind of something you wear, you have patterns that have been evolving for years, and that's what you use. So patterns are things that are observed. People have observed that those things work. So let me give you an example of pattern that works well when you make presentation. And let's see if I use those in the course of this presentation. To have good documents, you hopefully have it is structured, of course, which means that you need to use unambiguous tables. You use judicious diagram. You include guidelines for readers. What that means? What that means is you have things like this that tells you where you are in the presentation. It has things like the agenda and what is this presentation for, so that it gives you, to you, the reader, already information about what you're about to say and what is it that you're about to hear. So that's one of the patterns that work well in presentation. There's a few others that I'm going to go into. I just list them. You need to have traceable references, which, as I said, I made a point of making sure that they exist. You often use a glossary to make a reference to the terms that you use. You'll see that, I have that at the end. You want also to include a document history, because what you do is going to evolve over time. If you have several of you working on the same document, believe me, you need document control that suggests the document history. And you might want from time to time use thumbnail sketches to show you where you are in the presentation. That's the only one that I did not use explicitly, but sometimes I do. For example, when I included this kind of chart here, because those are thumbnail presentation of something more complex that make reference to previous information without you having to actually know exactly having to. The point was not for you to read them. So try to use this. Those are well-known patterns in the sense that it's a recognized fact that those work well. Let me give you another example of how to organize information. This is part of a deliverable we have. I think that was for Goldman Sachs. And the consultant that had done his work has done a good job. He has said, okay, we analyze the contract you have with several service providers, namely AT&T, Bell Atlantic, also, okay. And this is how much monthly commitment you have with those vendors. And by the way, I think that's what it meant to say, is that this is what is your spending look like? I don't know. Oh, it says contract, so there must be contract. So when I look at this picture, I say, well, what's the story here? What are you showing? The data is fine. What are you showing? And I reformatted in that following, which is the story is what is this chart answering? With whom are we spending money, and when should we start renegotiating? That's the whole point of this diagram. It says MCI, AT&T, and Verizon, and Bell South account for 94% of monthly telecommunication costs. So that's a big four. Forget about the other, those are the four, right? But most of those contracts are coterminous in December 2000 and should be renegotiated starting now. Now you have information. It shows that, look, this is going to a cliff, and those are the people we should start renegotiating. You can't get this from this chart. Number one, there's a lot of clutter information. You don't care about those other vendors. There's no comment here about what it is. This graphic is confusing, and there's no story. So try to organize your information to tell a story. You will see also from a graphic standpoint that there's correspondence. This is the Verizon color. It's green. I don't need the label. It's self-obvious. Here, look at this chart. It was not even the same color. This was print, and this is MCI. So it's very confusing from that standpoint. So something that is perfectly fine research, costs a lot of work to do, and etc., can miss the point entirely if you don't take the step of telling yourself what is the story. All right, that's the other. That's a compendium of chart junk. Look at this one. This one is the most horrible of them all. The scale is wrong. It starts what 28 to 72, but you know, there's only 5 data points in this chart. This is pretending to say this is the age structure of college enrollment. So it says in 1972 there was 28% of people who were less than 25 and over. In 1932 there was 29.2, and etc. etc. Why the hell? Why do they have this number? It's the 100% minus the difference. Of course, if there's 28% here, there would be 72%. They are over under 25. Why do you have this entire structure here? Now you have 5 colors: yellow, green, white, blue, red, and there's only 5 data points. Why is there this perspective? I don't know what, it is incongruous. The chart has to be even the scale. This is a horror. This is, and this is 25 and under, and it's below, on the bottom of the chart. There's also a reason why this thing is terrible. Now, by the way, this is one example from USA Today, and I could pick every day USA Today on the lower right, on the lower left. It's a terrible chart. Look at this thing. I mean, what's the point of this? I mean, it's like the key in the other chart, right? Don't do this. By the way, those are junk charts too. I can't tell you how tired I am to have, people making charts. It's essentially, verbiage, and they feel like, they're talking about sales. They need to put like somebody checking the handle. Like, don't do this. It's really annoying. And whatever. It's not working. There's also flying. In PowerPoint, the thing they go on. They said, don't do this. It's annoying. It's annoying. So that's why I call chart junk, and you have a lot of it. The reason why it's wrong is not because the number one reason is because you have less information and you distract from the meaning of it. That's really what it is. It's not even an issue of aesthetics. I gave you, over the course of this discussion, a number of examples. I like this one because this is an example of what we call a spider chart. Here you have, this is what this is supposed to be. We help a client identify what is good in their particular network. So we said, okay, there's 6 key metrics of how a network should be in terms of or how you manage the strategy for your network, how you manage the finance, the architecture, what you deliver, the system, etc. And each of them can be decomposed into certain features. And what you have here is that it appears that this particular client is, I don't care what the dimension is, but it seems to be that they are not as good as the vast majority of other clients, which is this perimeter here. And you can see in which places they are better or worse. That's an example of worse. Okay. So again, this would be practically impossible to represent if you have a table. Visually, this immediately gives you, and I don't know if you're familiar with those spider charts, it really helps present this information when there's really no correlation between the dimensions. I'm going to have to skip a lot of the data, and you will see there, because of the timing, some recommendation about how to put the table together. For example, this is an example where the data doesn't come across as well as this. Well, this is, if there's one chart I want to leave you with in terms of the visual presentation, this is the typical horror that you see in the PowerPoint presentation. And why? Okay, this doesn't work well. It's black on green, you cannot see it very well. This doesn't work either because when you print it in black and white, you will see black over black. There's a way to check this. This doesn't work either. But look, this is annoying because it's difficult to read. It looks like junk, especially because of the color, the font, you use italic, the line, and you will see it. I mean, so there's also a thing. Why do you have a big black thing? It looks like a death announcement. You have the shadow here. Another one that please don't stretch. Image. It looks funny. It is disturbing. So instead, do the following. And again, I'm going to give you some indication about what to do with this R here. So let me finish with a couple of very good examples. Again, most of those are from a very good collection of books on visual presentation of information. This is the reason why this time chart for the schedule of a train that runs between New Haven and Yale, where Tufte used to teach. There's also no reason why this chart doesn't work very well. It takes, for example, what happened in New York and New Haven really look the same. So you'd be better off. There's two charts, one on each page. This is New York to New Haven. It's not obviously, you can mistake one for the other. Well, something like this with an arrow makes it much more visible what you're talking about. You will see that there's a lot of clutter here. The X, you don't know whether it's express. It turns out that the X means that does stop at 125 and express is E. I mean, there's all sort of reasons why this is it's very difficult to, I mean, again, I can't time-wise go all over this, and this is the reviewed version, which is much simpler and much more accurate for the eye. There's another example here where this chart about the signal that you can make in front of a plane, why this is, first of all, the thing that comes across first is this enormous black box that takes a lot of your visual information and distracting. There's no, this little thing here, I'm not as compelling as a change of color. The diagram of the person is important, but it should not be as strong. And this is why the use of a much lighter grid convey the information better, and the use of arrows, the color coding of the arrows being red, for example, and the yellow being the, whatever you hold those, all this works better. I also extracted from the New York Times this, what I think is a fabulous chart, because it presented how the airline ticket cost went down, and you know, what it means that a flight that used to cost, I don't know, $1,200 is now to be had for about $500. And not only that, it looks like every cost went down. So here you have a lot of information about the specifics as well as the general trend that suggests that there's very few, actually that's an artifact of the scanning, there's very few fare that went up. And here you have, I think, a very good example of use of how to present information. And last but not least, it's the last diagram. I'll let you enjoy this one. It's a pretty famous chart. It represents the campaign of Napoleon to Russia, and there's a wealth of information. The fact, this is what it means. This is how many people started the march to Moscow. Part of the army camped in this particular place and then retreated that way. The rest went on its way to, so it tells you what's the path they used to go to Moscow. Then the Russian army actually left Moscow and let it, but then came back, and Napoleon had to retreat. And this is what happened. The temperature went down in an exceptional fashion during the retreat, thinning out the ranks of the troops. They were joined, as I said, by this contingent that had been left behind. And every time Berezina here, there was a substantial loss of men in the crossing of this particular river, and look, practically nobody came back. That is an amazing chart in terms of providing you a temporal and geographical information, to give you a compelling story about what happened, about how formidable the effort was, and how little it brought back at the end, and how it was correlated with the very unfortunate situation from a temperature standpoint. The fact that this was done in 1869 shows that the study of the masters and how things have been done in the past will bring you a lot of satisfaction visually. This is really a masterful example. I'm pretty much done. What I did for the convenience of the reader is summarize everything that I said here in the in the form of precept. Yes, it's a bit busy chart. No, I didn't present it up front because you would have no idea by what I meant. Hopefully you do now, hopefully, that the use of data mining or the use of other concepts here. But this is something that you might want to refer to when you analyze, present, or collect information about the techniques, how you analyze problem solving or envisioning information. The two attachments I have is what you could read. I really recommend in particular the work of Tufte, visual display of information, envisioning information, visual explanation by Tufte. Also, all of those are at some degree of relevance. And the key concepts presented here are here and there's links to the rest of the presentation. Thank you very much. I hope that will be helpful for you going forward. And,
we have just a small token of
you don't know up from down, and somehow we ended up, at a final point. So I definitely think it would have been nice to have more feedback in there, but it's part of the real world to not. And so it was, I think, a good experience for all of us who
More
are used to
feedback from who?
syllabus. Just from our clients and from, just from everyone, how we talked about like the focus at the beginning. But the real world is, it's ambiguous. So I think that was good for me to see.
Anything that you took away that you liked about it? And it's okay if you didn't.
Network, like
The network.
people at the university, professors, and like other than that, like not much.
For me, it's kind of I know how the consultant project really it is, and what's the difficulty, and what's the bright side, what's the dark side, and how do you to deal with those problems, and how to interact with your team.
I also had an excellent opportunity to speak with the CIO of Pfizer through our project. And I actually got to sit down with this man who was just the most brilliant person I've ever spoken to. And if that was,
Surgeon by
yeah,
20
he was
years.
bored being a brain surgeon. So he started working with McKinsey and just ended up doing great things. But that was an unbelievable opportunity.
So now talk to me about, here we go, the other side of that coin. What were the things that really and truly, we've talked about them a lot, I guess, over the last hour, but what are the things, like if you could sum it up for me, what are the things that let you down, you expected and didn't get?
I expected to be able to use more of my, I'm a hardcore finance person, I expected to be able to use a lot of my analytical skills, I wish I used none. My entire project involved surfing the internet, and it was very disappointing.
I think since we going through screening process, and then we are willing to sacrifice our time and energy into the project. So I think IBC is okay to ask more, for consultants demands more. That's what I expected at first.
How about you, Abby? Where did it let you down?
I agree with what they said, basically. It was just not as, I don't think I had the opportunity to, gain this toolbox of information that I thought I was going to use.
I honestly think they could have pulled a high school student off the street to do the project we did. I mean, it seemed like there was no brain power involved, to be honest.
And my experience is the clients did not authorize to decide the project itself. So
Say that again?
the client, the contact point of our project, he seems he did not understand quite much about what he really wants us to do. So the communication with the client, to me, is kind of ambiguous and frustrating because he never gave us a very clear answer when we proposed him something. And to me, even worse is he bringing another guy to sit in our meeting and give comments to that. So we are kind of don't understand what is there something wrong with our work, or why can he just say it very clearly, and we spend so much time in search for the MBA, yeah, not clear.
Certain things are planned.
Thank you.
I think it would have been nice to have more networking too. I mean, I didn't get to really go to very much social things, so out of my team, I really didn't get
Yeah,
to
more
meet very
about
many
the-
people.
More
But-
bonding with your team?
Yeah, team and other like IBC consultants, like.
So inside the organization as a
Yes.
whole, more bonding like that?
Yeah.
And like, bi-weekly gathering or something. That
Would
be-
you agree with that, Sean?
And I think with that is just, I mean, especially for undergraduates,
yeah.
like, you know, career goals, career advice, insider tips on, you know, what's Capgemini about? And do I want to end up there? And maybe you could sway me or not sway me, you know? I think I was looking for a little bit of that too.
It's one cool thing would be if, I mean, specific undergrads, like, I'm sure there aren't like a large amount of undergrads in the program, so like, it might have been cool to get all the undergrads to know each other, and so they could sort of ask each other questions, because we're all in the same boat, like you were saying. We're all applying to jobs, we're all or
No,
applying to
nothing
internships.
too.
We've never had a full-time job, so like, there's a lot we want to learn, there's a lot of opportunity to learn, but it wasn't really facilitated, so.
There's a lot of MBAs and everything that have already had a career experience too that I didn't really get to tap into.
Do you think your EMs are kind of in that aspect, not only leading the project, but also acting as instructors? Do you see that as undergrads? No? Should they or no? No. Okay, that's something I heard and I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
What you talked was a while back, like what good things my clients do. Like in the beginning of like the BP projects as a whole, they had like a huge conference call with all the teams, and they sent us like a knowledge object, which formatted like what the learnable should look like. And I think they put a lot of time into that, and it was a huge conference call. I think I don't remember when, but like all the projects were there. Like,
So with 3 projects for the same group,
CIO,
right?
the COO, and like
Mhm.
the other one. And I thought that was one really good thing they did. Like it showed that they put a lot of effort into it, that they were really interested in what we had to do.
So if, like, you would divide it up into different parts, like, let's say that the parts are networking, education, like applying analytical skills, so we'll call that real world, and then just like other, how would you rank them? What's the most important thing to get out of there, like networking, education, real world experience, or just to be part of it, to, you know, be part of something bigger?
To me, IBC, it was one of the things that attracted me to the university to begin with. I came here and I visited, and it just seemed like the number one thing they promoted was the real world experience. So to me, that was number one.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I used it as my internship for a real company, for, you know, real clients, for real work being done.
All right.
The one thing I did notice is when I did go through all my interviews and stuff like that, no one knew what IBC was in that year. And so I just had to explain to them what IBC was before I could even go into what I did for IBC.
So we need to do a better job at educating people that are coming to this university looking for talent.
I mean, I don't know how to go about it.
I don't think it was as marketable as I thought it would be. I mean, I was like, I'm working for a real consulting firm here.
Like,
You know, I used it as my internship, so, you know, I'm sorry I didn't have an internship, but I'm doing this. And in my eyes, it was the same exact thing to me. So I don't think they realized necessarily that it wasn't just like a club.
like once I was able to explain like, what it was and what they did, then they were interested in like hearing more about it. But like the companies I interviewed with had never heard of it, so it required more of it. little more effort on my part in terms of telling them all that other information.
I think that has part to do with the name change though too. 'Cause some people are like, oh, after I'm
When you say it
oh,
was,
yeah.
But like, not, you guys not like a core recruiting school in adolescence and stuff.
Right.
That I handled, it's like 2 of them don't interview here at all.
Sure.
And so, it makes sense they wouldn't know about it.
Okay, so we're about done here, but why did you not choose to participate in IBC again? I mean, if you could sum it up.
I can answer. I actually, for this semester, it's a time commitment issue. I actually recently committed to being a coach / mentor for something outside of the, it's for the leadership certificate program. I'm going to be coaching a undergraduate student who is looking to do personal development. So I have no idea how much time commitment that is. Plus I'm EVP of the GFA, so I didn't want to, is it too many acronyms?
Yeah. You guys know what's going on.
It's executive vice president of, it's a finance association.
That's,
But I just want to let you know that just one bad taste in my mouth is not going to dissuade me from doing another project. I do plan to do one next year.
Well, the reason you were all selected as opposed to people who like left and were just like hate IBC were because you all contributed to the project, right? And so I want the feedback of people who actually put in a lot of time and still decided that this wasn't a place for them to be. I need to understand what the implications of that are. I don't know if I can fix any of them, but it's something that I have to do.
Mine is solely a time issue, I'll be honest.
Sure,
For
right
this
now.
semester.
Right.
But I do plan
But
to
I
do
mean,
it
you
this
also
year.
had very valuable responses to things that you didn't enjoy or you did enjoy. So, I mean, that's the whole benefit as a whole. Others, like if you could, why did you decide to do it again?
I'm in the TNM program as an undergrad.
Right.
Final semester of that, we do like consulting project for corporate sponsors. My current project is sucking up like 15, 20 hours a week, so I don't have time for other consulting project. But I'll be here till December, so I thought I'm picking up IBC again next semester.
the MPD was, I mean, it kind of got messed up. We thought it was continuing. We thought we had this big project. And then it turned out that we're, kind of making a flyer for an info session. And so it's just like, I mean, it's not that I was necessarily opposed to being involved. It's just I thought that that was going to be something more than it was. I think that's it, son, too.
Huh?
I'm in the project.
That's right, you're in another project. You're just giving it an old college try. All right, well, I think that's everything.